space exploration is undergoing a new era, enabling new endeavors for humanity. Amidst the ongoing paradigm shift, the space industry has become more accessible to new entrants. Amidst the paradigm shift accelerated, a wave of commercialization of space activities is attracting new startups that disrupt the traditional space industry. Nonetheless, these startups face challenges to scale up and endure, and data is our best witness. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Space for Women show, series 35, Darwinism in the Space Sector, enduring capital-intensive activities in the space ecosystem, alongside with some true space pioneers, Ms. Lisa Rich. She's the managing partner at Hemisphere Ventures, a frontier tech VC named as top VC in the space sector in 2020. Mr. Jeffrey Manber, who is the CEO of Nanoracks, a serial entrepreneur and author. And today's show will be moderated by our visionary thinker, Ms. Shelli Brunswick. She is the COO of Space Foundation and one of the first 35 selected UNOOSA Space for Women Network mentors. Without further ado, the floor is yours, Shelli.
Well, thank you, Tian. It's a pleasure to join you and Malak and everyone else this morning. I'm honored to be your moderator. We have two fantastic guests today with Jeff and Lisa, and it's going to be really exciting. What I'd like to do is, Lisa, if we could start with you, let me read a little bit about your background. You're the successful investor, strategist, communicator, and operator. You founded and managed and the managing partner of Hemisphere Ventures, an early stage venture capital firm focused on frontier technology. And you're also the COO of Explore, a commercial space exploration company providing low cost access to space with missions to Earth orbit and beyond via your highly capable X-craft. So it sounds like you have a really wide and diverse background and a lot to share with our audience today. So without further ado, thank you and good morning, good evening, good afternoon around the world.
Thank you, Shelli. It's great to be here. I'd like to start with an overview for our audience today of the space sector to really kind of set the stage in terms of what are space companies doing, what are the opportunities there to get everybody's minds turning and to understand just the breadth and depth of the growing space ecosystem. I'm going to share my screen here. So Hemisphere Ventures, we are a venture firm and I'm a founder and operator, as Shelli mentioned, have invested in over 200 companies overall in early stage startups. And over that period had developed an expert network, individuals that can contribute to any type of vetting for companies in frontier technologies, as that was our area of interest. Along the way, we've invested in 20 companies in the space sector. And as well, I'm an International Space University alum. So shout out to all of those members in the industry. The space industry is quite large. If you look at Bryce Space and their reports for 2019, you can see that this is about a $370 billion industry. But as we break it down into the opportunities of how to be involved in it, traditionally, the largest sector in space subsector would be the telecommunications capabilities. But really, if you think about it in a simple way, right now, all the activity in space is about observation and communication capabilities. And if you look at Bryce Space, you can certainly, or Seraphim Capital, which I'm sure many of you international audiences are familiar, there are some great reports here to really understand more about the sector itself. But what are companies doing in space? As I mentioned, the big umbrellas of observation and communication. These arenas bring about, there are capabilities in these areas that are really fascinating and a big part of our space future, which is mapping and monitoring, or companies that are selling components and hardware. They're doing location and tracking. There's a lot to the space infrastructure, free flyer platforms, which Jeffrey can probably talk about. We've got, of course, data that Hien mentioned. Of course, it's the data we bring back from space that informs us about all of the ways we can improve our life here on Earth. Data is, of course, all those details from space can be so valuable to us, and we gather them in many different ways with sensors and with instrumentation. So whether you're an engineer, looking to be an engineer, looking to analyze data, or the creative side of space where companies are needing to communicate what they do. That's kind of the biggest need, is if we have some future communicators out there, there are great opportunities in the space sector for you, because all of these companies need people to communicate their message to different audiences. And I don't mean to confuse that with the communication capability itself when we're bringing data back from space. I thought I'd highlight a few of Hemisphere's companies here that some of whom you may have heard of. I think they've made some international news. When we all watched Bob and Doug, the astronauts, flying on the SpaceX capsule Dragon to the International Space Station, they were, that was a really celebratory moment for our portfolio company, Axiom Space, because astronauts need to be trained in order to fly to the space station, and Axiom has that unique capability. And we'll be training all the private astronauts that will be going to the space station on the SpaceX Dragon starting next year. So very exciting for Axiom. But the longer term vision of their company is, as the International Space Station is decommissioned, which we expect that to happen in about 2028, Axiom will be building the next, world's first commercial space station, allowing for private astronauts to be on the station and for private activities like R&D to be done on the space station, which is quite exciting. You may have heard of Made in Space, based as well, that has a European component working on robotic arms. Made in Space actually had a buyout this year by Redwire, so that has exited. But it's a fantastic company, and one that I thought I would mention because the idea of manufacturing materials in space is really speaks to our extraordinary future of creating new materials and testing the capability to, for example, have metal alloys that can be created in space because they can bind in a microgravity environment. So, you know, why not have more materials that are twice the strength and half the weight and have this extraordinary value because they cannot be created on Earth? Or materials like Z-Blan, that is a highly conductive material. So many, you know, additive manufacturing that can be done in space, in space assembly that can be done with materials that are manufactured in space with robotic arms, etc. Just bodes for a very exciting future. And I think a lot of creative thinking about what we'll be doing in the future. Umbra is fantastic company doing synthetic aperture radar. And what is that? That's basically high resolution space-based imagery, because we need those images from space. And that's really exciting as well, because if you think about the observation of Earth and the kind of visibility we can have with a company like Umbra, you could see the height of a curb from space. You could see the potential deforestation occurring, where in Nigeria, trees being knocked down, the thickness of the leaves and the denseness of the forest can be identified from space, which is, I think, just phenomenal. Planet IQ as well, they're working on space weather, the ability to gather data that can do weather prediction and help us have a better sense of accuracy in terms of hurricanes and floods that can occur. Basically, if we have early warning of weather events, this can save human lives. It's not just about logistics and a package getting to its destination in the right amount of time, but it can actually affect human lives. If we think of Hurricane Katrina, if they had had advanced warning, hundreds of thousands of people could have evacuated the area with hours to spare. And so advanced warning of weather is highly, highly valuable. We also have a company I wanted to highlight called Orbit Fab, which is a really a fun one to talk about because space missions today require your propulsion, and when that propellant is used up, that's the end of your mission. Why? Because you cannot refuel in space. There's no gas station in space. And so Orbit Fab has a capability to refuel on orbit. And really exciting because that means these missions, of course, the cost of launch is extraordinary, but once you're flying a mission, the ability to extend that mission lifetime means that any of the instrumentation you have on board can continue operating, and we can continue bringing more data back. So the effort of that launch really will maximize the value over time when you can refuel a spacecraft. So currently Hemisphere invests in US corporations. We are launching a new fund that will be considering non-US companies. But we encourage all sorts of partnerships that are international. And as I wear my Explorer hat, I work very closely with emerging space agencies. Sure, folks may be familiar, there are 65 countries around the world with emerging space capabilities. So no matter where you are, space is coming to you, the opportunity is coming near you, and it's a great time to be involved. I'd like to recommend a book for everyone. Friend of ours, Robert Jacobson, wrote called Space is Open for Business. I think that I'm going to escape this now. But Space is Open for Business is really kind of a walk through the space sector and who's involved and what are people doing in space that's interesting, what have they done in the past, what might you do in the future. And so that's a book I would share. It's available on Amazon, and I'm sure Robert will be happy that I decided to mention it today.
Well, fantastic, Lisa. That was amazing. And there are so many opportunities for entrepreneurship, like you said, that whether it's outer space or solving Earth's challenges, you highlighted that there's the opportunities exist for entrepreneurship. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to our Q&A session that will follow. I know the questions are lining up. Next, I'd like to introduce Jeff, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nanoracks, the market leader for access to LEO. Previously, Jeffrey was the only American to officially work for the Russian space program, serving as managing director of Energia USA, and he carried over the first commercial contract between NASA and the Soviet Union. Jeff also served as the CEO of Mirkor, which leased the Russian space station. In 2012, Jeff was awarded the NASA Exceptional Public Achievement Medal. Thank you and welcome to our show today, Jeff.
Good morning again. And as I was saying, when Ian asked me to join this great group this morning, I was a little confused because she asked me not to talk about my current company, Nanoracks, but to talk more about myself and how I got here. And that's terribly difficult to do. but I will I will try, okay, and explain how, how do you go from being really on the outside to being on the inside. And so what I'm going to do quickly in the 10 or 15 minutes I have is talk about four experiences that I went through. One is Pan AmSat. Excuse me, some of you may remember that. The second is my time with the Russians, Energy and Mircorp. And finally, Nanoracks. And there's a straight line that goes from the beginning to today, and that is the commercialization of space. And Ian, if you could put on the slides, I guess, and I don't know how much I'll follow the deck, but let me say that when I started 30 years ago, there really wasn't any commercialization of space. And it's always a shock for people, the younger people in my office. They'll say, "Well, who were the competitors when you were working, when you began in the industry?" And there were no competitors. The United States was completely dependent on the space shuttle for our access to space. There was no SpaceX. There was not India working on launch vehicles. The International Space Station did not exist. And yet there was a small group of us that wanted space to be, more than anything else, we wanted space to be another place to do business. And so in the late 1980s, the entire concept of everything everybody this today is doing was considered pretty radical 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And I can remember walking into meetings where I would literally be the only person in the room who was neither government or military, and it was just terribly difficult. And one of the first things I can say to you is, it's okay to be that individual who is different. It's difficult. It's challenging, but you have to learn to believe in yourself and understand that if you have a vision and you have a goal, and you just keep doing it. I'll tell you that one of my mentors was Rene Anselmo, and it's such a shame he's pretty well forgotten today. It used to be that if you were in Europe or if you were in New York or Los Angeles and you wanted to make a phone call, you had to do it through a PTT. Okay, you did not pick up your phone and just call internationally. It went through a government monopoly, a government monopoly, and it was called Intelsat. And there was this crazy man, Rene Anselmo, who was Mexican American, who wanted to send soap operas from Mexico to the United States, or the United States to Mexico, I don't remember which one, and found out he could not do it because the cost of sending things over the satellites to another country was so high. And Rene created Pan AmSat, and I was honored. I was 20 something years old, and I was one of his assistants. And I watched as Rene broke down the monopoly, the government monopoly of Intelsat. And when Pan AmSat went public, he reaped the rewards, but that doesn't matter. He changed the world, Rene, as we know it. That's why we have CNN. That's why you pick up your phone. That's why you can do Skype. That's why we can do Zoom, is because of Rene Anselmo and the commercialization of space and a company called Pan AmSat. And I learned some things from Rene from that. I learned that the people who came before you, I hate to say this, may not have always been right. Okay, I learned that the government controls our industry. One of the biggest problems we had in busting the Intelsat monopoly was the amount of the intelligence community that controlled and listened in to international phone calls. And they did not want Rene having satellites that a private company owned. So the very concept of commercialization of space, of being a space entrepreneur, has changed in my lifetime. And so one of the first things to say to you today is you have to stay true to your dreams. It's okay. It's perfectly okay if you are the unique person in the room. You may be alone in that room, but you're not alone in the larger context. If you go to And I'll say one more thing and then go to the next slide, is I've been very fortunate. I've gotten a number of awards in the last 8 or 9 years, the NASA Exceptional Award, Pioneer Award. Organizations have given me awards. At one time or another in my career, all those organizations that gave me awards hated me. What more can I say? Okay, during the time of NASA, during when I was working with the Russians, Dan Golden, the head of NASA, he disliked what I was doing with the Russians so much. And he was angry and he'd call me up and say, why are you doing this with the Russians? And yet we could not have done the International Space Station without the Russians. And that's a fact that everybody recognizes today. So you shouldn't be concerned. You should stay true to who you are and the journey that you wish to take. Next slide, please. Just move down there. Thank you. But having said that, I've spent my life doing commercial space, but I am more than only space, and so are you. And that's something that's beautiful. Uh, I've written a number of books. I've written, I don't know how many articles on fiction, politics, and what's important about it is that today we've reached a point in maturity where space is almost another business. It is another community, and communications is important. And how you bring new people in to this industry, whether you bring them in as partners, you bring them in as investors. I mean, Lisa did such a wonderful overview of the industry. And as is normal for both of us, she didn't talk that much about herself, but she had her own journey that reached the point. And I can tell you that Lisa is not a shy person. And so having skills such as communication and having skills of doing other things is an extremely important part of who you are and how you can be successful. Next slide, please. So I noticed that the title, one of the titles of today's talk was on Darwinism, and it used to be that in our industry it was propped up solely by the government. And as Lisa made clear, that is the case a little bit, but it's not the case as much. You need sound business principles today. Okay, you need customers. At Nanoracks, I could not be more proud that we have customers in over 30 countries. We have deployed over 280 satellites, and we have existed on customer revenue. And so what does that mean? Step back for a moment. What does that mean? It means that space is a normal business. In many ways no different than the internet business, software, media, public relations, or running a restaurant. Okay, there are certain things that must be followed. So, and first is individualism. Do not worry if you stand out in that room, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color. In my case, as a non-military person 25 years ago, this is going to sound silly, but I was criticized for so many things. I don't wear a tie. I was criticized. My hair is too long. I was criticized. I was told 5 years ago that if we wanted more DoD business, the CEO of Nanoracks would have to have shorter hair. So help me God. Okay. So I'm just happy, I have it. You have to stay true to who you are, and you have to understand that individualism is extremely important. And now the slides have disappeared, so I don't know what else I had on there. If I could come back to that, thank you. Yeah, if you go back to the points, and then I'll wrap up. So if you go back to you should also be really encouraged that diversity today, as so much, and here I speak as an American, diversity is welcome today, and cultural differences are welcome. People, all of us, Shelli, myself, Lisa is CEO. We all struggle to make sure that our companies reflect the overall society, and how much that has changed from 20 years ago. Very difficult for me 20 years ago to be doing business in Europe because I was too young. and they didn't respect me when I was in my 30s. That I'd go over to Europe, I'd walk into the room at that time. I was, as was said at the opening, I was the only American to ever work for the Russian space program. I'd be at these meetings representing Energia, that's still the prime contractor for the International Space Station, and I'd be sitting in the meetings at ESA or in Europe, and they disregarded me a lot because of my age. And it was really frustrating for me because the other people in the room did not understand what was going on in Russia. I did. I worked for Yuri Semyonov and Energia, and we helped privatize the Mir space station. And as head of Mir Corp, Dutch company, I ran the Mir space station for a year. And yet, a lot of the European businessmen would not listen to me because very often I was the younger, one of the younger people in the room. And so you have to find your space. You have to find your allies. And whether it's done by email today or watching someone's eyes, see who in the room is nodding. See who in the room is listening to you. When you get an email or you hear a comment that says somebody's been listening to you, that's an ally of yours. And build up those relationships, and discard, deal with the ones who are ignoring you, judging you because of how you dress or your age, or you're a woman or you're a person of color. You put those people in one group, and then you watch the growing number of people who are listening to your messages, and who are showing you the respect that you deserve. Don't expect them to do business with you because you're young. Don't expect people to do business with you because you're a woman. But when you get that, when you earn that respect and you earn it from a number of people, uh, stay close to those people, because that's how you build your base, and that's extremely important. Couple comments, and then I'll wrap up. I was thinking this morning, I don't know how many of you know that movie Shakespeare in Love, um, and reminds me of when the actors, to be a woman on the stage during the time of Shakespeare, you had to dress as a man. You weren't allowed to dress as a woman. And there's a great moment in the movie where Judi Dench, I think it is, as Queen Elizabeth says, "I know something about what it's like to be a woman in a man's world." And so what you're confronting, many of you today, the situation has improved so much, of course. But I understand it's not right. It's not where it should be. A few months ago, we had a new medical plan here at Nanoracks. And I was so happy. It was a much better plan. It was a good price. And at the last minute, I turned to some of the women in my office and said, "Hey, I'm from New York, so I say guys. Hey, guys, can you take a look at the latest plan before we announce it?" And they looked at it and they came back to me and said, "Jeff, it's terrible. It has nothing for women. It does nothing for us." It's I had never thought of that. I had never thought. I looked at it for me. I looked at it that it was good for me. It was, the price was good. Okay, end of story. But I did reach out to my colleagues who were women, and we went back and we corrected the medical insurance. What's the anecdote there? First off, we're different. Second, diversity takes on greater challenges. It takes a little more work. You got to think about other people. Your views may not always be, what your needs may not always be what the company needs, the organization. It takes more work now to have people different than you, outside your comfort zone, different background, and yet you get a better company. You get a far better company because you reflect the needs of the community, and you reflect far better, I hope, who you are. In summation, um, I've worked in my career, Pan Amsat, Energia for the Russians, Mircorp was a Dutch company where we leased the space station. Nanoracks today, we have offices in Europe and the Middle East and in Houston and here in Washington, D.C. We reflect the community. We work very hard to do that. And we're not doing it today because of what's happening in this country. We're doing it because it's good business and it's good karma. And I guess a final statement: what if you're starting out in this community today? The opportunities have never been greater, never. Okay, but the challenges remain, and you're not alone. And it's true in every industry, in every market. If you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're different in any way from what the current management is, it's difficult. And stay the course. There are a growing number of people who support you, and I guess that's it. So thank you for giving me the chance to work through my own thoughts this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. That was really insightful. I can tell that our audience really enjoyed your talk and talking about more than it's important to look at entrepreneurship and the space sector. And we have a few questions that relate to that, but sharing your passion about the diversity and inclusion is so important today. So thank you for sharing that with us. So I have a couple questions that I'd like to ask first of all. And one of them is, how do you know if you're in the right sector? Lisa, do you want to start with that one? Oh,
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you. How do you know? Well, it's interesting. My career has evolved and I have been exposed to so many sectors. It's crazy. I've always been an entrepreneur, but prior to launching off on my own, obviously I needed to have earned enough money to try and take a go at it of being an entrepreneur. And so many, many years ago, I was a creative director for the ad agencies. I was working on strategy for corporations, communication capabilities that they needed. And so in those capacities, I was exposed to, especially at an ad agency, I was exposed to every possible business there is out there because those were the clients of the ad agencies. Then I was in corporate, and so printing and pre-press. I actually started my career at a greeting card company, of all things, managing 5,000 SKUs of product and $50 million in product was my first job, managing 14 production schedules and $50 million in product. That was my first job out of college. So how do you go from that to being in the space sector? I think it's really the skill sets that you're building along the way. It's definitely shoring up, well, now that I know that I can do this, what am I going to learn next so that I can add that to my skill set? So I think that's my evolution anyhow, is learning that I could really evolve very quickly, be a sponge, learn how to do things, and then grow from that and not pigeonhole myself and say, oh, I learned how to be a product manager right out of college. That's my future. No, that isn't my future. My future is I'm unbelievably organized. I'm highly efficient. I'm highly effective. I can juggle a million things at one time. So what can I do next? I think it's thinking about your skills and then evolving and taking your career where you want to take it, not saying this is now my future because I've proven that I can get a job in this area.
Lisa, I appreciate that. I think that's really helpful for the audience to understand that it doesn't matter where you start your career or your entrepreneurship. It's building those skills. And Jeff mentioned that too, communication skills. And then you continue to grow and develop, and you can be part of the space sector. Jeff, I'd like to ask you the same question. How does our audience know if they're in the right sector?
It's not important if you're in the right sector. It's all about a journey. Okay, so I mean, enjoy it while you're in it. And maybe you're doing something for a couple of years and it's not the right sector. You'll find out because either it doesn't feel right, or you're not building the business, you're not getting the customers. If you're lucky, you turn around and you sell, you have an exit, and you pursue something else. But I wouldn't worry. I mean, make sure your business is correct, make sure you feel good about it, but I wouldn't worry about the label. Just you change the label, maybe keep the same thing you're doing and make it a different label.
And I think you always have to love what you do. I mean, that's really the key. If you're feeling boxed in in your position currently, you have to find some other avenue to really grow and nurture new skill sets so that you can advance into other areas.
I think that's really helpful for the audience to understand that it's good to be an entrepreneur, but to be an entrepreneur, there can be a lot of skills that are needed, and you learn those on the journey, because this is, after all, we're all on that journey. Another question we had was, how do you know when it's time to scale up? When do you make that decision to scale up or start that second line of business?
Let me, Lisa, if I could, man, that hits me, because being an entrepreneur, it's there. I mean, everybody has the studies and you have the analysts, but it's what you feel in your gut. And one of the most difficult things of being an entrepreneur is that moment you jump over the cliff. And you have, you do it or you don't. You look at your friends, you look at yourself, and in some cases, people, giving an American example, people mortgage their house and and say, I believe in this. And so the more rational answer is you talk to people in the business, that you have some customers, and the data-driven answer is there are times in Nanoracks where we cannot fulfill all of the business that we're getting. We need to hire more people. And so we have had to borrow money. We don't really in the past have done investment as much, but borrow money to scale up the business to meet the request we see. But the general answer is at some points you jump over the cliff.
Excellent. Lisa, what are your thoughts? How does somebody know when it's time to scale up or open another line of business?
Well, I think you want to, I've always operated on it's only the paranoid that survive model. And so, I've been an investor since a very, very young age. And so understanding finance is so important, and making sure that you have a nest egg and you can have food on the table and a shelter over your head is so important, so that if it means working weekends on the business idea, that's what you have to do to make sure that you've got your full-time job during the week, paying the bills. That's number one. Take care of yourself first. And then when is it time? Business models to build a successful business. A lot of people love the idea of being an entrepreneur, but the work involved is really unparalleled, and you have to be willing to work 24/7, which we do. So it's very, very different than a 9-to-5 job where you leave your worries at the office and you start your personal life at 5 o'clock. That doesn't happen as an entrepreneur ever. Even if you hire people, you are in charge. And so, you've got your financial concerns, but then building a business plan is number one to build a sustainable business. I love to say, if you cannot create a spreadsheet that shows your business model can be sustainable and generate revenue, then you should not be attempting to build a business. It's got to be the business model that has to make sense. As we like to say, the business case has to close.
Excellent. Jeff, did you have a follow-on statement?
Sometimes you leap over the cliff.
Excellent. Excellent. So the other question I wanted to ask is, what does it take to be a space unicorn?
Want to go, Lisa?
Well, you have the success story most recently, so I would love to hear your thoughts first.
First to market is really important. Okay, when we started Nanoracks, we were the first company in the world to own and operate our own hardware on the space station. All the smart people, the reason I sort of reacted to Lisa's last statement was in 2009, all the smart people in our industry knew the space station was going to be deorbited in 2015. So why in God's name would you invest your own personal money and start a business that had private sector research equipment and services on a space station that was coming down in 5 years? And I bet, literally, that the station was not coming down in 5 years. That's why Lisa's correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So 99% of the time, Lisa's correct in that if you can't do the spreadsheet, and we do the spreadsheet, and they would end in 2015. But people,
but NASA.
Yeah, that the station is not coming down in 2015. And if it's not, we will be first to market in this area. So to not take up time, to be a unicorn, you should have be first to market. And second, have a tap into something in our business. So speaking about our business, tap into something that probably previously the government had dominated. And that means it's inefficient. That means it's just, I'll leave it there. It's inefficient. So if you can be first to market, look at SpaceX and you look at Northrop Grumman. There had been other launch vehicles, but they won the first contracts to service cargo to and from the space station. It had been government dominated with the space shuttle, and they were able to bring in government, private sector imagination, efficiencies. So in our business, try and be first to market, try and find something new, try and find something that the government has dominated up to now, as Lisa's doing with Explore. It's a business where the government has dominated deep space exploration, and there you have a chance to be the unicorn.
And to add to that, Jeffrey, I think it's really about calculated risk. So I'm not suggesting that there has to be certainty before you jump off the cliff. That is a luxury. That does not exist. There is no certainty. But there's calculated risk so that you have a sense of, well, not only, when do you go for it, but when do you pull back? So you have a sense of, we're going to test this out for now, because when Jeff is using the term first mover, and I like to use that term, but as well, another one I think our audience would like, which is being a category creator, which Jeffrey, you are. You've created new categories for business, and then when you create a new category, you can dominate it. It's the most opportune way to generate, a new business, but will there be early adopters? Can it be sustainable? That's the whole risk there, but it's worth it.
Yeah,
I think we agree.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wonderful. I could go on and on asking questions, but I know Malak is getting questions from the audience. So Malak, I'd like to turn it over to you to ask a few questions from our fantastic audience joining us this morning, this afternoon, or this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear panelists, Jeff and Lisa, for the insights and amazing input. And actually, our audience, they are very reactive and they are asking a lot of questions. The first question is, what are some of the biggest challenges startups face? These challenges, they are unique to the space industry.
I'll start by saying I was going to answer one way, but then you added at the end, unique for the space industry. We suffer from a number of challenges. One is it still remains a government-dominated market, and governments move slowly. So there you are, you're eager to begin. You may have some investors. They may be friends and relatives to start off, and they want to know when you're going to get that first contract. They want to know when the first things are going to happen, and you're waiting for the government. And it doesn't move. It's not like unless you're in the software niche or something. So the first thing that's unique about our business is the government domination and being an important customer. At least we've made them a customer. The second is we have a lot of international regulations. What a crazy business where I can't just get on Zoom and talk to somebody. I have to ask, what's your citizenship? What a crazy thing that is. Okay, so you have to understand that everybody says, you're in the space business. Okay, are you going to be like Elon? Are you going to be like Elon? You're going to make billions of dollars, and you you have to temper that with understanding we have some very unique challenges in this business. So.
And I would add to that, if the company needs to have funding, and there are two paths for that: non-dilutive funding, where you're looking for grants and government awards for the proposals that you can write and work that you can start doing. We certainly encourage that. But ultimately, to grow in the space sector, usually you're going to need to raise venture capital. And that is a really big challenge, because any venture investor is looking at your company as compared to all other deals on their desk. So it's a lot easier for them to invest in somebody's app than your complicated high technology company that they don't understand, and that you have to communicate what, the long-term value to them. So that's why I emphasize communication. I'm a little biased there, because I think that, I've mentioned Planet IQ, and I literally sent a message to some of our investors saying, I know this concept of advanced radio occultation, which is their capability, makes eyes glaze over. You don't know what that means. What is radio occultation? RO, I don't know what that means. But here's what you need to know about it. So you really have to bridge the gap, because you've got investors that can make investments in things that are much easier to understand, and the value is easier to understand, and the timelines are shorter for achieving revenues, because they don't necessarily look at the long-term growth. So it's tough.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would say about Jeff answer about this question with the challenges in the typical to the space industry is the space industry is different than others, because very complex market forces that they are intervening, other even than the governmental dominating aspect of it. And of course, the entrepreneur needs to be aware of the international regulations and the international space law, and so many that it could be misunderstood in somehow from the entrepreneurs, especially the young. The youth that they are entering from a technical background, and they don't have that expertise, and they don't have the business expertise, which is valuable to listen and to go through your path and the way how things are you did it. And very important also for Lisa to share the way how a lot of questions they come about raising capital. It's like when an investor is come, or let's say I come from the perspective of the startup entrepreneur. If they want to pitch to an investor, and a lot of fallouts with that and challenges with the first contact with the investor, and to go through that process of pitching and getting an investor to get back to them. What is the best advice that you can give to people to understand and to follow and look at in order to move forward from just the pitch and to go on and scale up and have that funds that they are looking for?
Sure, thank you for the question. I think that, well, Jeffrey and I have had some fun with the Techstars Startup Space Weekend, and these are accelerators, and these are concentrated kind of events where entrepreneurs come together and bring business plans or don't, and in a weekend are trying to come up with what could my space company be. And so those are just, events out there to spur creativity, but also that the idea of being part of an accelerator. Accelerators are organizations that really prime you for being an entrepreneur with access to mentors, access to partners, contacts. Partnership is so important in the space industry. Joining forces is just necessary to, I think, build your profile and capabilities. So definitely getting started with, I would say, those types of environments can be very, very helpful for early stage companies.
May I add a comment? Just something that occurs to me. Two things. First off, I agree with Lisa that being part of an accelerator or space incubator is really important, and especially given this panel and this organization is Space for Women, probably it's more comfortable than being alone. And there's a lot of reasons to be part of a group that of people who are there to encourage you, give you critical advice. So really, you know, if you can be part of a accelerated program or something like that, it's really important. Second, though, is a cautionary tale. People don't often say, be careful of someone who offers you funding. You know, let me tell you, there's not all funding is equal. Funding comes with investors. You have to make sure that your personalities are the same. You have to make sure that the goals are clearly articulated. Don't think that it's like a friend that they're giving you funding and then, oh, I'll switch and do something else. So number one, you have to understand and think very carefully before you take the funding, because of the personalities, the type of money. The questions I see this morning are on VCs. VCs are one type of money. They have a certain duration. They need a certain return, 10x time return. Whereas a strategic investor or a geographical investor, economic development, that's different money, different types. One other thing unique to our business, Lisa and I will know of companies that have gotten in some trouble recently because they've taken money from places that the American government doesn't appreciate and the European government doesn't appreciate. So you have to be very careful. You've done the business plan, you've done the spreadsheet, you've been part of a group, and now you got investors. And you have to dig in. They're going to dig in and do what's called their due diligence on you, and you have to do the due diligence on the investors.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's for sure. Due diligence is very, very important. Investors and partners and so on, because what they say, coming from legal background, they say always the contract is not enough. What is very, very important is the trust, which is most important than anything else. I have another question, and it's from our dear Bianca, a team member, and she's actually asking Jeff, the question is, what's the process you would recommend for an early stage? Actually, she said UK/European. Now, after the Brexit, probably two different schemes, you know. So what she said again, so what is the process you'd recommend for an early stage UK European-based startup to establish partnership with Nanorack, and how likely is that to happen?
Oh. Great question. Thank you. We're always looking for partnerships. We have an office in Italy. We have some relationships with companies very close to Thales Alenia Space. They helped build the Bishop airlock, which, thank the space gods, just arrived at the International Space Station a few weeks ago. We are always, you just approach us at info@nanoracks.com. and explain how you think we can work together. What we would do is say, first off, is this a capacity capability that we now enjoy, or is the person writing in giving us something new? If it's something that we already do, we might say, no, we're already doing this, we have this bandwidth. Number two, what's the market? Is there a market there? Can you define what doors would open, or what opportunities would come to Nanoracks by virtue of doing this partnership? We enter into partnerships all the time because we're a smaller company. And what I've just said applies to any company. Lay out very clearly, I know your company and I know you're missing this. And here's what my company can bring. and you don't have to spend the money. You don't have to invest to get this opportunity in the UK or in Berlin. We can do that for you. And then we take the conversation from there.
Thank you so much. I would ask the same question to Lisa regarding any partnership opportunities for the audience if they want to reach you out.
Yeah, it's a great question. And my space company Explore does have a partnership with Nanoracks, actually. And that speaks to our capability, which we haven't really talked to very much. Explore can fly instruments and for customers in LEO or beyond Earth orbit. So we provide space as a service so that it's a way for someone that's working on an instrument to fly to Mars, Venus, or beyond, as well as in Earth orbit. And so with Jeffrey, that relationship was wonderful because his payloads are flying to the International Space Station, but those same customers may want to fly beyond the International Space Station. Well, what a win-win for both of us. Let's join forces. So those types of, that just mindset of being the enhancement to a company is great. So for Explore, as I mentioned, we fly in LEO missions we're planning. So early stage companies that have instruments that would that they want to send, they can talk to us about that, or capabilities that would be needed for Mars, Venus, and beyond, and ideas for that that might be of interest to Explore. We're always interested in seeing what's out there. I look at early stage venture not only to invest, but because we see synergies with Explore, potential synergies. So it's neat that I wear both hats.
Thank you so much. I would end up, before I give the mic back to Shelli, with this question. Is there an average minimum to the seed round for space startup? For example, is the minimum normally more 250,000 K or more? So it's for you, Lisa, I believe.
Oh, sure. The seed rounds today tend to be $2 to $5 million. That's just what most investors consider seed rounds for any sector, really. I love this new term, but there's also the super giant seed round where, and I can't wait to be in that category, a super giant seed round where you're raising, beyond 5 million. But so those numbers that they gave would be what you would consider a pre-seed round, I would say, when the company is just getting started. And those investors in the pre-seed might be micro VCs where they make small investments of 50,000 or 25,000, or you work with family offices to try and raise that money. So the friends and family round is what we typically would qualify that as.
Thank you so much. I would like to finish my Q&A session before giving back to Shelli by saying thank you so much for being here. And actually, the bright side of the space economy and the space industry that are like, regardless of all the challenges, the space has been going through this amazing paradigm shift. There's a space sector is going through internationalization, civilization is very, very difficult to say, and commoditization, which is induced by the emergence of the new space. And it's amazing for all these startups that they have opportunities, even people that are not from the space industry, they could access because actually our lives right now depend on the space technology, and depends of our next giant leap into space. So thank you so much, and I get back to Shelli.
Well, thank you, Malak, and thank you, Lisa and Jeffrey. I think this has been an amazing panel. It's been insightful, informative, inspirational, and I hope that our audience takes away that there were many questions about needing large capital, but again, not everyone's going to build a space station or off-planet activities. There's lots of space technology. We provided some tech transfer information for you from NASA and ESA. There's opportunities to do water purification and manufacturing and cybersecurity. So if you want to be in the space sector, there's opportunities beyond launch vehicles and astronauts. And we hope that you will look at those websites if you don't already have a great idea about how you can be an entrepreneur. And a lot of times with the government websites, as Jeffrey said, there is sometimes a little seed funding that comes with that. So again, we are located on LinkedIn. We're happy to continue the dialogue if you need help. And again, please feel free to go to the UN Space for Women website. There are 35 mentors around the world who are waiting to help you launch your entrepreneurial dream. So again, thank you, Lisa and Jeff, and back over to Hien, and thank you for a wonderful day.
Thank you, Shelli, for this great moderation. Thank you, all panelists. If you, as Shelli mentioned, if you would like to directly connect with one of the official UNOOSA mentors, please go ahead and visit the Space for Women Network UNOOSA webpage. You can apply to be directly connected to one of those mentors of your choice. And I know we have many questions already for Jeff and Lisa coming in. So thank you for today's panel. It was amazing. So as soon as we log off here, next week's show, we invite you to join the future of AI, how robotics will catalyze the human evolution in space. So stay tuned for that. And we see you next Saturday at 3 p.m. CET. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.